Mr. Polis, would you like to be recognized for 5 minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The young people are actually from the Alexander Dawson School in Lafayette, Colorado, so we're excited to show them a little bit of democracy in action here today. Director Ashe, I want to thank you for being here this morning. I was thrilled to see the details in your U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service budget request. With the request was $5 million for the Urban Wildlife Conservation Program, an important restoration and maintenance program for high-priority urban refuges like our Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Wildlife Refuge, which is a historically significant and beautiful site just out of Denver that many of us enjoy. I want to thank you for your leadership in recognizing the unique significance of Rocky Mountain Arsenal. Look forward to working with you towards developing a healthy and vibrant place. On a more concerning note, I want to, it's my understanding that Fish and Wildlife Service continues to consider managing overgrowth in the refuge through a prescribed burn. And I was very happy that earlier this year there was a prescribed burn taken off the table for this year. That's an issue that will likely be revisited. I want to make clear how troubling the idea of the burn plan is to my constituents, from the Boulder County Commissioners to the Rocky Flats Stewardship to the Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center, to many constituents who wrote in their own capacity. Our local voices were united against the grave concern from the impacts of such a burn, not only on the landscape of the refuge itself, but on families that live just south of it, and on plants and animals that call it home. Unfortunately, Director Ashe, it's not an isolated issue. The level of public engagement and community input into fish and wildlife management protocols and decision-making is something that needs to be addressed. And I do mean we. I recognize this responsibility that falls equally on all of our shoulders. Can you speak to how we can work together going forward to secure greater opportunities for public input in the management of Rocky Mountain Arsenal, and to ensure that input is given, local input is given weight in subsequent decisions?
Well, thank you, Congressman, for recognizing that, I mean, these are challenging issues. Oftentimes, managing a refuge in an urban environment it can be a challenging issue, especially when it comes to things like prescribed fire. But I think the way forward is to increase communication, and I know our regional director, Noreen Walsh, engaged personally on the issue with regard to prescribed burn, and I think, you know, helped get to the place where we are today. And I would commit, and I know Noreen would agree, that we can do better, and we'll redouble our efforts to work with the local community to make sure that, should we move ahead with the idea of a prescribed burn, that there's an opportunity for a full dialogue, and people are confident that they're going to have an opportunity to be engaged in that discussion from the beginning.
And I hope that with the strong opposition in the community to controlled burn, I hope that you look at other alternatives to that.
We will.
As well. Thank you. Mr. Ashe, for another question, many stakeholders in states like Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, Colorado, and New Mexico support the service's approach to conserving the lesser prairie chicken, which is now listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. The backbone of this collaborative approach is a March 30th deadline, by which point the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies needs to obtain sufficient offset units for impacts associated with oil and gas operations, demonstrate that 25% of the units are protected, and demonstrate that permanent mitigation complies with the service's standards. It's our understanding, however, that the Fish and Wildlife Agency might miss that deadline, and that your agency is considering whether the deadline for permanent conservation easements is actually a requirement for oil and gas operations to continue after March 30th. Coming from an area that is looking at this as a model for how we deal with sage grouse, help me understand the purpose of having a plan and a 4D rule that relies on commitments from the states and industry, that has firm deadlines that must be met, and that creates reliability for the industry to move forward, only to then waive them because the states have not held up their end of the bargain.
So we have not waived any requirements with regard to the range state plan. The March 30 deadline was the deadline for the states to comply. We gave them a waiver for 1 year from the requirement to have credits in the bank before they could draw debits from the bank. And they have met that requirement. The bank is solvent. The bank is in the black. They have enough credits in the bank to deal with anticipated debits in the coming year, and so they have met that requirement. The question is with regard to the requirement for at least 25% of the credits to be permanent conservation as opposed to temporary term conservation agreements. They have not met that. requirement in the plan, but they've also asked a fair question, which is it appropriate for them to have to meet that requirement within 1 year, because permanent conservation agreements take longer to put in place. It's clear that they are working on long-term conservation agreements, and so we have, I'll say, an ongoing dialogue with the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies about that. They have agreed that they know that they have to meet that term of the 5-state range-wide plan, and I believe that they will. I know that, and they know that there are also opportunities for them to do that, working with independent mitigation banks, and we are in discussion with them as well about that.
The March 30th deadline for 25% permanent is very clear. And is there new information, or do you have a revised deadline for that?
Again, maybe we have a disagreement about whether that March 30 deadline is clear with regard to the 25% requirement. I believe it's ambiguous. The states are asking for time to meet that requirement. And again, as we look at the words in the agreement, there does seem to be some ambiguity there. The question is, are they working on conservation? And the answer to that is yes. Have they relieved, have they met the 1-year requirement for making sure the bank is solvent and in the black? They have done that. So they are making substantial progress in following through on the plan. But that one question of when do they have to meet that requirement for 25% permanent conservation?
We'll submit the rest in writing. I see my time has expired.
Thank you.